Well, it's a quick look at the 3 filing vices and verification that they all function. One little detail, though, that I would like to do to the one last one, and I've done this to the other ones, and that's work on the fit of the jaws. They don't always come together exactly right, and the more contact surface you have with your work, the better off you're going to be. So we need to do that real quick, and it's really pretty simple and straightforward. Shouldn't take you more than a couple of minutes. The idea is to file the insides of the jaws until they're just right. The easy way to do that and make sure they're parallel is to just loosely hold them together and run the file right down the middle, and you should only take out the high spots. And once you're filing straight across on the whole thing, you're pretty much done. You can't squeeze too tight or just pinch the file and it doesn't slide. Ideally, you use a file the exact same thickness of the material that you want to clamp, but I probably don't have a file that's exactly the right thickness. That should pretty much do that. This one little corner isn't quite touching. So let's see if that holds any better. Of course, it was holding before. That holds just fine. So you can see that the file marks aren't even. You're not trying to file the same file pattern in there. This was high, so it had to have more taken off of that side, and similar on the inside. So that was really the last step in completing the filing vices. We had waxed these previously just to help protect them, but I'm not going to put wax where I just filed because I don't want to lubricate the part that's doing the holding. Somebody had suggested cross-hatching. Actually, I think several people suggested that. And I think you could probably do that. I don't know if it helps a lot. These really just grip at the tips, depending on what size material. They would only come parallel and tight on one size of material, so you'd have to make a filing vise for every size if you wanted it to be tight all the way across. Usually it's just coming together at the tip, and I'm not sure cross-hatching is going to make any difference. But it wouldn't hurt if you wanted to. If you make these out of tool steel and you harden them, then the cross-hatching might leave an imprint in your work, so that would be a concern. Another idea might be leather pads or little rubber pads glued in there, but I've never seen that done, and I've never been tempted to do it on mine. Yes, the work moves around a little bit sometimes. You just tighten it back up and you go back to work. It's not really a big deal. So I don't know if you need to go to the extremes of doing any of that stuff, but it would be options if you wanted to. Now, I've gone through most of the steps in making 3 different versions of these. When the steps were exactly the same, I didn't necessarily show them, and I did not show the very first one I started, which was the one with the twisted 90-degree boss on it, and I will try to explain that again. I was just doing a test, and I wasn't real thrilled with it, so I didn't bother to show that on video. But if you take a bar and you fuller in so that there's a dip in the bar, you can twist that bar 90 degrees to itself, and that forms an offset on both sides, or a flat section at both angles, one 90 degrees the other, and that's what becomes this boss. And it certainly worked, but it was fiddly and it was fussy, and they want to untwist, and there's a little bit of a twist down there now, and it just, in the long run, I think it was more trouble than it was worth. It seemed like it might be the more straightforward and the easier approach, but I'm not wild about it. I don't think I'll try that again. I've done it with tongs and had better luck with tongs, but they aren't this heavy of material. And I think there's more chance to refine the tongs as you work the jaws and the reins to get all that right. But even with the tongs, when you do the twist, you can put a little bit of a cold shut in, and that cold shut could be a problem in the future. So you have to be careful about that. This is not really that heavy duty. It's made out of heavy material just so you don't bend it when you squeeze it in the vise, but other than that, it doesn't get a lot of abuse, so the cold shut will probably never go anywhere. And the same thing with light duty tongs done that way. It's a good introduction to tong making. It's a valid way to do it, as long as they're light duty tongs and not something you're trying to muscle 2-inch square bar under the power hammer with, because that probably wouldn't hold up. But for 1/4-inch material, making hooks, 1/8-inch stuff for hinges, things like that, no problem at all. The other method we tried was a purely fabricated version. And this one is actually probably my favorite from an aesthetic point of view. Because I welded them, and because my welds are usually not the prettiest thing in the world, I ground everything. So this has a smoother finish, a little bit more refined look because of the grinding. I got filled in the top of the lug with a little weld so I could put a little curved transition in there. Just kind of filled it with MIG wire, metalworker's Bondo. And while I like this one, and it's probably one of the prettier ones, I don't know that I'm as proud of it because it is welded, and as a blacksmith, I prefer forged things to welded things. If this is what you want to do, it really made a very nice filing vise, and this is a good tool. So there's nothing wrong with this whatsoever. If you want to weld, I just prefer forged stuff when I can do it. So that leaves us with version number 3, and this is the one we showed most of the steps on throughout. This is the one I tried to show everything that we did. We did a kind of an upset 90-degree bend. We forged the boss out of that at the edge of the anvil. We shaped the jaws. We made a threaded bolt sort of a thing to make this lug to keep it in the vise. And it all works very well. It came out better than the twisted version, and it could be ground and cleaned up just as much as the welded version. I just didn't choose to grind it because it was all forged. And it is a completely functional, 100% usable tool, and it looks good. Nothing wrong with this one at all. It just isn't quite as clean as the welded version. If I were to do it again, I would definitely probably go back to a method more like this. If I was just trying to replicate any of these results, this is the one I would go to, simply from a blacksmith's perspective. But any of these techniques will work. Any of them will get you a good filing vise. Another thing that came up quite often was a video from DF in the shop. Dennis did a filing vise, a little bit lighter duty one than these. He used smaller material, so it's a little more obtainable. I like the heavy ones so they don't bend. But he used a spring like this. This is not a filing vise. It's another tool that was made to do a specific job and is hung on the wall for the last 10 years because that job is over. But he made one with this looped kind of spring and forged in the lugs to hang it from the vise so it doesn't fall out. And just like this, it works very well, and it's all one piece. So there's no assembly, no punching, no riveting, none of that kind of stuff. It's just forge it out. And I'll put a link in here to his video so you can go watch his video and see how he did it. It's a very good technique. I think I'll probably do one like that just to see how it goes. But like most blacksmiths, I have problems leaving well enough alone. As I do something, I see other ways that it could be done. A lot of you saw other things that you might have done, and if you make one, you may do it completely different than I will. And I encourage that. That's how we learn new things, and as a group, sooner or later we stumble across a better way of doing things, and if we share that information, then everybody gets benefit from it. So what would I do different if I were starting all over again and making an all-new filing vise? Well, I'd still be thinking like a blacksmith and not a welder. So I think the next approach that I'm going to go with is to start with a square bar. This is 3/4 inch square bar. And I would probably start with 1 inch because I like the heavier vices, but the 3/4 would be a valid way to go and make one, and I'm going to do that as a test piece. But I would butcher in a square section on one end. So this is 3/4 inch thick, 3/4 inch long, put a butcher in, and leave this about 3/8 to a 1/2 inch thick here. This will be the part that will be rounded up and then offset and forged the boss. Here I would butcher in on the opposite side, again about the same distance, and leave about 3/8 of an inch, 1/2 to 3/8 through here. And this is what would become the lug, and then I would fuller here and draw this out, and that would become the section for the jaws. So that would look then something like this after it's drawn out. This section in here gets drawn out, and it gets longer, and you end up with a bar kind of like this. And this is, I think, the approach I would take. That way the lug is part of it. It gives you a chance for a little fullering and decorative work right here because I think it looks good for no other reason. And gives you a boss that is fairly simple to form, and I think in the long run this might actually be easier, even though it sounds like working a 1 inch bar is a lot more work. But I think it may not be in the long run. So I'm going to finish this. I'm going to do this to this one, what I've done to this one, and I'll finish it up, and I'll show it to you at some point at the end of a video. But at the moment, I think we're going to call this series of videos done, so this will be a whole new something else, and I'm going to play with this idea. But I think this is the way I would go for a future filing vise. And for that matter, filing vices don't have to be bent, they can be straight, and I think I'm going to make these exactly identical and probably cut them off up in here somewhere, and this is going to be a little straight filing vise just for holding little things vertically in the vise. So there's some final thoughts on filing vices and the approaches that I took to make this series of videos. I've numbered these 1, 2, 3. I may number this one 4, or I may number it finale or final, or I quit, or who knows what I'll number this one. But the very first video was just entitled Filing Vise, and it didn't have a number. So if you want to see that little intro that doesn't actually go into making the filing vise, go look for that. But otherwise, there's 1, 2, 3, and then this video, whichever I choose to number it. So it's been a fairly long series, and like most series, the first video gets a lot of attention. Viewers drop off for the second one, more viewers drop off for the third one, so I expect this video to not see a whole lot of viewers. But those of you who stuck it out and enjoyed watching this, I really appreciate that. It was a fun project, and the trying this, trying that, doing something a little different is part of what's fun about blacksmithing. And if you're a hobbyist, you're in it to blacksmith. That's what you're doing. Have fun trying different things. It's okay to make 4 or 5 versions of the same tool, and if you don't need 4 or 5, if they're not all somehow useful because of their differences, you can give them to your friends. That's really a good way to go. If they're really nice tools and you're really proud of them, you can sell them. And I'm proud enough of these that I'll probably put these on the Etsy shop, even though each one has its little oddities or little unique things that maybe I might not make that style of tool again. But if you're looking for a filing vise and don't want to make one, these will be available. You know exactly what you're looking at because we've explained it, and they'll be priced based on what I just explained to you a minute ago on what I would do different or why I don't like this one quite as much as I like the other one or something like that. So I think if you're looking for a filing vise, it'll be pretty reasonable. Other than that, I am not sure that I can talk about filing vices anymore. So I think it's time to wrap it up, call it quits. I think we're going to town for pizza tonight because it's buy one, get one free night, which means we get pizza for lunch tomorrow. In the meantime, I do hope you can manage to get out to your shop, make something, have fun, enjoy the time in the shop. It is precious, it is special, and it's something that you cannot replace with any other thing we do in blacksmithing. Reading books is great, watching videos is great, but you got to get out to the shop, you got to swing a hammer, and you got to get the experience. So head on out, light that fire, and get to work. But do stay safe, do wear your safety glasses, and we will see you later.